Hello again, stranger. How you been doing? Someone made a comment on my lag bolt video that lag bolt screws and nails should only be used for shear force and not for tensional value. Now to give you guys a little bit of an example of what these forces are. Shear value is this. Torsional is this. Okay? That's tensional. That's tensional value. And this is shear value. Okay? And he said, like his comment, kind of got me like, Okay. Now, back in the good old days, the long ago days, we didn't really have an abundance of screws, and screws were expensive. So in the long ago day, we used nails, but we were smart with our nails. We would make them with ring shanks. Okay, these ones have ring shanks. These ones are spirals. Okay, these ones were used for when we needed to hold something in, keep it from coming apart if we weren't using glue and adhesive. Okay, and these worked wonderful. And anyone that's ever done demolition, you know about these screws. But we also had these, they came out with a staple gun, a big arse crown staple gun that used 1/2 inch and 7/16 inch crown. Now I don't have any of those because, well, I haven't stapled a roof or sheeting in years because our building codes are way different. But these, the bigger versions of these. Now anyone that's ever done demolition will know these things have no shear value whatsoever, but when it comes to tensional force, when used in a high volume like we used to when sheeting, these rings are pretty damn good at holding stuff together. Pretty damn good. Even though they're quite simple, but it's how they go when they go into the wood. They crisscross, they twist, they bend out. But in high volume, these worked great. But nowadays we got screws, and screws are in abundance. Now, back in the day before we had wonderful structural fasteners in this, when I was building stuff, we had nails and we had screws. So, like giving you an example, when I was building decks, I would use both of these. I would actually use the screws to suck everything together, and I'd use the nails. So I'd go 1, 2, like on my 2x8s, I'd go 1, 2, 3 with the nail, then a couple inches apart, 1, 2, 3 with the screw, and I'd do that every 12 inches to 16 inches depending on code, going all the way down to put my beams together. And when and where I could, for hanging stuff, I would use carriage bolts or bolts. But if I couldn't, I would use a lag bolt, because lag bolts got some pretty good grooves, but I'd do them properly, and I'd make sure I had the right number and they were the right length for the job. But that's the thing, is for a long time, roofing and drywalling were all done with nails that looked like this. Then we got smart and we started putting little rings on them, and used ring shanks for drywall and shingling and stuff like that, and we used the ring shanks for siding and that. But now for sheeting, we use these things. Now sheeting has shear value and torsional value on the roof and on the walls and that, and these things really catch me out. But when we're framing houses and that, most of us use pneumatic guns. Now, if you're going to do stuff by hand on a framing job, I'm going to recommend using the spiral nails for almost everything that you use by hammer. I use these constantly. But when we have our guns, you'll notice that there's this funny color on them. That's an adhesive that literally heats up from friction, and it kind of swells a little bit. The chemical process is magic, okay? And so when it drives in there, now it's got a little bit of adhesive that bonds to the nail and the wood, and helps give it more torsional value. And when it comes to stuff like hangers and metal connectors and hurricane straps and stuff like that, now you can use the big heavy nails, but you got to go big. or you're going to end up going with engineered nails that are engineered to have more shear value. But these things don't only have a shear value, there's a torsional value, because when the house is rocking back and forth this way, everything wants to start pulling apart. So in some cases, thanks to modern technology, we have specialized engineered screws for just that purpose. But for the most of it, you're going to be using nails, and for your hangers and metal connectors, these are metal connector nails. They're specially engineered. This thing here has twice, well, I think it was 3 times the shearing force of this big boy here, because of what they're made out of. But you also notice that there's some glue on these things, on the top and the bottom. And that's to give more adhesion for the tensional value. But are these optimal? Well, if you're doing something that requires a lot of shear value, you're going to use a nail. If you have something that has a lot of torsional value, like drywall or hanging stuff from a ceiling, you're going to want to use a screw. But when it comes to shear value, the screw is worse than this, unless it's a big old engineered screw. Where did you go? Unless it's an engineered screw. Now, these engineered screws are great for tensional and shearing value. But when you're using the good old-fashioned methods, and sometimes using a combination of both, like I used to do when I built decks and stuff like that on the houses, and doing my beams and my laminated beams and that, I use a combination of both. But it is not true that nails and screws should only be used for shear value. They do have torsional value, but it also depends on which one you use for which application, and also sometimes just using some good old glue. But when you can, fancy joinery is really good. And where you can, and where it's going to be more applicable, using carriage bolts work. They work the same as like these good old Simpsons, you know. These things are pulling up. They're not just giving this. When that tornado and hurricane comes along, there's a lot of pulling up force. And see, it's just a smooth little shank with a little collar there that expands. And this is why we try to use Hilti Hit or proper adhesive when working with these things in the concrete. But to make that comment that nails and screws and lag bolts should only be used in shear and not for tensional use is a very false statement. And like I said, there are many old houses out there still to this day that when we started using gypsum board, everything's held up with a nail. Everything's held up with a rail. Your shingles on your roof are held up with nails. Not only that, your houses, they're built with nails. And with a house, there is forces going up, forces going down, forces going left, forces going right, forces wibbling and wobbling. It all depends on how big that storm is outside. But not only that, just natural forces of wood expanding and contracting, pulling stuff apart, and then swelling back together. But we do use these fasteners, depending on the application, is what you're going to use. But this is why I'm so happy we live in the now, because we got some really good engineered fasteners coming up that we've come up with that are wonderful. They're expensive, and when you can afford them, use them. Use them. If you can't afford them, then be creative and use combination of nail and screw where you can. Construction adhesive is a good thing to have. Wood glue is a good thing to have. But yeah, that is a very false statement to make. And I just wanted to bring this to attention. So I hope this helps you guys understand a little bit better. But if you ever hear that statement again, know that it is a false statement. Because I can hang something with this nail up there, and I can hang on it, I can pull on it. It's going to take a lot of force to pull this nail out of there. It's going to take a lot more force to pull this out, a whole lot more force. Like, a lot of people know how much weight you can put on these screws. Did you know this screw here, if I put a nice double set of washers on here, screw it up till it's just right tight, and I put a weight on it, a little cable and some weights, the screw should, by its design and its engineering, be able to hold at least 250 pounds of weight. It should. Not always, but that's what they should. Okay? And that's why the more threads, the better. Like, these things are awesome, but they cost a lot of money to put extra threads on them, I guess. Like, it would be so much better if they just put all threads on there. But this is what we get. But there you go. I hope this explains stuff a little bit better. I hope it makes sense to you. But some things are not true, and some things are true.